This video is made possible by Practical Defense Systems, the best online security training at the lowest prices. You can start your security career today online at pdsclasses.com. Check them out. Hi, I'm Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV. I'm super grateful for everything that you do. Please do check out the GunGuyTV Firearms podcast. It comes out on the 5th and the 20th. It's an audio podcast you can get on your favorite podcast player, but you can also see the video version on Rumble. And if you join GunGuyTV crew, then you'll get all the exclusive content I provide pretty much every day of the week, as well as the entire 1 hour of the GunGuyTV Firearms podcast. I got a great interview today with Dan O'Kelly. Dan has been so busy, he hasn't been able to come on the show for a while. And as a result of being so busy, he wanted to give you some things to think about so that you stay out of jail and so ATF doesn't come knocking on your door and drag you into prison. So that's the reason why I've titled this video what I've titled it. Without further ado, as a result, let's go talk to Dan. Dan, first of all, it's really good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. You've been busier than a one-legged man at a butt-kicking contest, and I've been kind of on the same boat. And frankly, other than the rule change that ATF went through, they really haven't, I don't think they've been in the news a whole heck of a lot. But you've been dealing with I'm just going to go with the title of today's talk, which I put down as How Not to Get Tossed into Prison by ATF, because you've had some serious cases where people have just done stupid stuff, haven't you?
Well, some people have done stupid stuff, but a lot of people have done things that weren't stupid. They were actually not illegal, and yet ATF has gone after them. And a lot of other people have done things that, they had every reason to believe was legal, but due to certain facts that were unknown to them because ATF doesn't publicize their so-called rules and whatnot, you find a lot of situations where people get in hot water, and I hate to see that. But I wanted to know if you were interested in chatting about a few topics. I don't know if we'll have time for all this, but I've had a lot of cases lately, and of course I can't name any of the specific cases due to agreements with the attorneys and everything. But, there are the issues of solvent traps / fuel filters / silencers. There's the issue of pistols with braces or shoulder stocks. There are some issues concerning destructive devices, specifically the guns over 50 caliber. And then there's some issues concerning machine guns. And lastly, there are some issues concerning any other weapons. So if you have a favorite one, otherwise,
I don't. Honestly, I would say start at the top and go to the bottom. And if we run out of time, we run out of time. But I think we'll be good.
Okay. Well, on the issue of solvent trap, fuel filter, silencers, we all know that there are these companies that have sold these things over the internet over the last few years. And these companies have advertised them as fuel filters. I've seen the ads. There have been various ones on Facebook or whatever. Some of them were even in the form of videos. But of course, the definition of a silencer is, quote, anything for diminishing the report of a portable firearm. And everything after the word for is just a descriptive phrase. But unless the item is for diminishing a report of a firearm, it doesn't satisfy the definition of a firearm. Of course, there are a couple of other definitions, such as any part or combination of parts intended. But again, that word intended. ATF loves to prosecute people for things that could have been used for something. It wasn't used for that. There's no evidence. There's no indication of intent. But yet this person finds themselves under indictment, in prison. It's just, it's terrible, the legal fees that some of these folks have to pay. So in the case of solvent traps, I've seen a number of people get busted for these. You see the ATF technical report, and it always says the same several things. Number one, it had the same features as a bunch of silencers that we have inspected in the past. Okay, I don't know how that makes anything guilty. But number two, it had residue in it. You know, they always say unidentified gray residue. Okay, well, so does the muffler on my car. The next thing, it actually would fit on the end of a, you know, it would screw on to the end of a gun. Well, if you go to the hardware store, you can probably find a lot of things that will have threads on it that'll screw onto the end of a gun. Doesn't mean it was intended for that. And then finally, when we fired through it, when we, ATF, fired through it, lo and behold, it diminished the report of a firearm. Well, yeah, there are probably a number of things in anybody's house that would do that if you fired a gun through it. Is there any evidence that this person did that? No. So there's also this other, all of that adds up to no evidence. And, you know, I've seen people acquitted because of it, or charges dropped.
Well, and the problem there is that they're acquitted if they have a good attorney and if they have a good expert.
True. A lot of times their attorney doesn't know to bring in an expert, doesn't know much about guns. And that's what I get from a lot of attorneys that call, hey, I don't know anything about guns. And I say, that's fine. You do legal, I'll do guns. We'll work together. And, you know, then we get these things cleared up in a lot of cases. How many people out there have seen that now when you send in a Form 1 to register a silencer with ATF, the first thing they do is send this letter back saying, send us pictures of the items you're going to make this with. They've started doing that. And once you do, you send in a picture of a solvent trap or tubes or whatever you have. They go, can't register that one. You're going to have to turn that stuff in. That's illegal. And I pause for effect. They're right. Here's the thing.
Well, because it goes back to intent, right?
Exactly. If you have any parts that are intended for fabricating a silencer or muffler, then those parts are a silencer. The way this process works is you decide you're going to build a silencer. You fill out the Form 1, send in all the paperwork. You wait until it comes back stamped and approved, and then you go out and you find what it is you need or make what it is you need to make this thing. If you have any parts ahead of time, you're already in violation. So,
okay, and not the completed item. It's not that you completed it. You just have possession of the parts necessary to complete it prior to getting that tax stamp, and then you're in violation. Did I get that right?
Right. If I have a flashlight and all it's for is lighting my way at night when I walk around in the dark, that's all it is. But the moment that in my mind I intend to turn that into something for diminishing the report of a firearm, it's now a silencer. Because it's something it satisfies the definition.
Yeah.
So that's why you hopefully don't have any parts until after you get approval. So just a word to the wise there.
Well, and if you do, shut up. Don't announce it.
I
don't put it on the internet.
Yeah.
And don't tell ATF. And maybe get the parts out of your house somewhere would probably be a good idea.
Yeah, they say so many times in these reports, and this is the last thing I'll say about that, you know, that this could be used to diminish so could a lot of things. So what? You know, it's funny that I point out in these cases, well, I lied. Here's one more thing. The reason that muffler is also used in the definition of a silencer is because that's what a silencer is. It's a muffler, just like the muffler on your car, your lawnmower. But instead of muffling the gases coming out of a combustion engine, it's obviously for a gun. The point is a muffler does what a muffler does, regardless of what the gases were produced by. So when ATF points out in these reports that, well, hey, this thing had features just like a silencer. Well, yeah, that's because silencers are mufflers, but then so does the muffler on your lawnmower. But it wasn't intended for use on a gun.
So without going down a rabbit hole here, it's the absurdity of this. I'll carry it to an absurd example. If I have a .22 rifle, and then I get an empty plastic water bottle, and duct tape, and it's my intention to tape that water bottle to the muzzle of the rifle to reduce the sound coming out of the rifle for the first couple of shots. And that is my intention. Then even though we're talking about two items which normally wouldn't have anything to do with suppressing anything, by virtue of the fact that that's my intention, I'm in violation. Do I have that right?
Yes, you are. You have committed a felony. But on the same token, if your intent is to tape that same bottle using that same tape to the end of the gun for the purpose of catching the dirty solvent when you clean it, you do not have that intent, and it is not a silencer. You haven't broken any law. And that's where ATF comes in. Well, it could have been used. Now that you taped it on, that's what it could have been used for, so you're busted. Well, that's not what the law says. So,
interesting.
The next thing is, and this is something that I don't know what kind of traction we'll get with it, but just quickly, we'll move across this quickly. Think about pistols with shoulder stocks. And we're not talking about pistols with braces on them, but say an AR-15, you buy a bare receiver, you build it into a pistol. Okay, that's a handgun, a pistol. Features are it's designed to be held and fired in one hand, has a chamber integral to the bore, and it has a grip at an angle to the bore. Fine. Then you put a shoulder stock on it. My question is this. Given that there are exemptions, well, let me back up. The reason that short barrel rifles and short barrel shotguns are in the NFA is because back in the gangster days 100 years ago, what the government wanted to prevent was bad guys taking non-concealable long guns, cutting them down and turning them into concealable guns, right? Well, concealable guns, like handguns, those are perfectly legal to possess, buy, make, sell. So
carry.
What's wrong with concealable? Right, carry.
Yeah, I carry them all the time. You do, right? I mean,
right.
Yeah.
So the thing is, if you put a shoulder stock on a pistol, you've now done just the opposite of what that law says.
I was going to say you've gone the other direction. You've now made it non-concealable.
Right. You've taken what was perfectly legal and made it harder to conceal, which they should be happy with. Well, here's the thing. There are exemptions to so many of the definitions in the Gun Control Act and in the NFA. There are exemptions to firearms. For example, antiques. Anything that falls into one of the four definitions of an antique is exempt from the Gun Control Act. Ammunition. There are things that don't qualify as ammunition because they're exempt. There are things that don't qualify as machine guns because they're exempt. Destructive devices because they're exempt, etc. Those are topics for another chat. But the point is, why didn't they put an exemption into the SBR, SBS law saying, hey, if you put a shoulder stock on a pistol, that's okay because it's 180 degrees from what we are trying to prevent. And I think the only reason it doesn't exist is because the people who wrote the NFA, 1934, they didn't anticipate that putting shoulder stocks on pistols was going to become a thing. As a matter of fact,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you said, when they wrote this law 100 years ago, and I thought, gosh darn it, it has been almost 100 years.
Right.
That's how long. I mean, the purpose behind the NFA was in place 100 years ago, but it kind of is gone. I mean, there's really no purpose to it anymore. The whole reason why they did it expired when, 10 or 15 years after they did it, and there's no reason to have it around anymore.
I'll agree with that. I mean, again, we could go off on a tangent about machine guns, compared to something with a binary trigger on it. How fast is fast? So what are we preventing by not having machine guns? Anyway, there should be an exemption to that. And I just don't think that they thought of it at the time, or they probably would have. There, as a matter of fact, are a lot of pistols with shoulder stocks that are exempt from the NFA as curios and relics. Certain Lugers, broom handles, high power Brownings, you can put shoulder stocks on them because they're exempt as curios and relics. So why not all of them? Anyway, that was that topic I just wanted to touch on. The next one I have is destructive devices. Again, we're not talking about IEDs and bombs. We're talking about Definition 2 of a destructive device: any firearm that's has a bore over half an inch, in other words, over 50 caliber. If you look at the whole law online, you'll see that there are about 7 exemptions at the end of that definition. And the very last one of those exemptions says any rifle over 50 caliber, which the owner deems to be sporting. Now, the very
wait, back up, hold again. Which
okay,
the
I knew
owner,
this was gonna,
which the
yes,
owner deems
the
to
owner.
be sporting.
Yes, your next door neighbor who is a welder, a butcher, whatever during the day, if he builds, makes, whatever, a 20 millimeter rifle, a 40 millimeter rifle, as long as
My
the barrel
shoulder
is
is hurting already.
Oh yeah. No, look it up. It's on the internet. As a matter of fact, it's on ATF's website. If you look up definition of a destructive device on ATF's website, you'll see a list of 7 exemptions at the end of the 3 definitions. And the last one is any rifle which the owner intends for sporting purposes. Now, the funny thing is the very first exemption is any shotgun over 50 caliber, which the Attorney General of the United States says is sporting. So if it's a shotgun, it takes the top law enforcement guy in the entire country. But if it's a rifle, it has grooves in the barrel. You know, the goofball down the street gets to say this is sporting, and it's no longer a DD under the NFA.
Yeah, it's sporting.
Which, you know, I don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying it's funny that there's such a disparity between those two. So here's the deal. Let's say I had a case where a guy had a couple of receivers for M79s. Well, the receiver with no barrel is just a firearm. It's just a Gun Control Act firearm. It doesn't have a barrel over 50 caliber. But then someplace on his property, they find a barrel for an M79. And so they charge him with possession of a destructive device, saying, you know, this is constructive possession. All you had to do was snap them together. And I'm going, well, here's the thing. There are several issues there. If you were in the process of making a functionally destroyed one, which we can also talk about, makes it legal, or if it was 16 inches long, no problem. Putting it together, hey, it's a sporting rifle, it's exempt. But here's the thing. The barrel, the average normal military issued barrel for an M79 is less than 16 inches. So he couldn't use, that person hypothetically couldn't use that defense because it would then still be a short barreled rifle. So listeners, if you build a over 50 caliber rifle for sporting purposes, you still have to have a 16-inch barrel on it, or you'll be in violation of the SBR law.
How often does that become an issue? I mean,
Not
obviously
really.
you've seen a few of them, otherwise you wouldn't be talking about it. So
Yeah, a few. And here's the thing. How often? It only has to happen once if it's to you, and then it's really, really important. So
yeah. It's 100% of the time then.
Right.
That's right.
Anyway, if we have time, I can come back to it.
We do have time, Dan. I want to ask you a question, though.
Okay.
How does ATF stumble on these? I mean, do they stumble on them? Are they looking for this stuff? Is it that somebody, the neighbor called? I mean, how do they actually get the lead that somebody's got such a rifle?
It can be from one of a number of sources. It can be anything from you're minding your own business. Your dog bites the neighbor on the ankle. They call the police. Police show up to take a report, and there it lays on the dining room table. You forgot to put it away, and it's in plain sight.
Plain view. Yeah.
Right. Or you are chatting about it on the internet or Facebook or some social media thing, and not smart. If you have something that's illegal, social media is probably the worst place to go out there and brag about it or show pictures of it. Or in some cases, people are selling what they believe are innocuous parts kits that don't violate the NFA. You get some ATF person who says, well, headquarters told me that is illegal, so I'm going to get a search warrant. And, now they're in your house going through everything and find it. There are a lot of different ways, but
would you take a brief minute then, because you just brought up something again, which is the parts kit. Would you take just a brief moment and explain the concept of constructive possession? Because I have a feeling that bites people in the rump quite frequently.
it does. Let's say police walk in your house to take that police report of a dog bite, and there lays an M79, 40 millimeter grenade launcher, barrel, stock, everything's put together, receiver on your chair. Well, that's straight up possession. On the other hand, let's say they hit your house with a search warrant, and in your office you have the receiver of an M79. But the search warrant also covers your garage, the trunk of your car, and your storage unit down the street. And in the storage unit, they find a barrel for an M79. Well, your name is the one on the lease for the storage unit, not somebody else. You have the keys in your pocket to the lock on that unit, etc. You're in control of those. The only thing that hasn't happened yet is you haven't snapped the barrel onto the receiver. But that takes a matter of 4 seconds, give or take. So that's called constructive possession. You're in possession of everything, definition 4 of a destructive device, all the parts necessary to make a destructive device under the control of a person.
And so essentially you're a felon. Boom.
Yeah.
You've just committed a felony. You're going to get hooked up. You're going to go to jail, even though you never put the thing back together. And maybe you never intended to. It doesn't matter. Is intent an issue there, or is it just, you've got the parts and that's it?
Intent is not an issue. There are 3 definitions of a destructive device, any bomb, grenade, rocket, mine, etc. Number 2, any gun over 50 caliber. Number 2, any missile. Number 3, any gun over 50 cal. Number 4, any combination of parts from which a DD can be assembled. And it doesn't say anything about intent. So just the fact that you have them. And that same definition exists under machine gun, too. There are 4 definitions of machine gun. The 4th one is any combination of parts from which a machine gun can be assembled. So people need to be aware of these. And that's one of the things that we drive home in our training, in our firearm specialist classes. You've been to that. You know that. And
yes, and shameless plug, I highly recommend, if you are a gun owner and you have a collection of guns, or you like to collect guns or whatever, that you take that course. In fact, you can do it online. You don't even have to show up. So there you go. And I'll put a link in the description.
Actually, I was the one that threw in the shameless plug there when I mentioned our training. But yes,
that's okay. I just did it for you.
Well, it is the difference between knowing what you need to know to stay out of jail and not. All right, the next thing, talk about machine guns for a minute. I've seen this on social media, Facebook especially, on some of these pages where guys talk about saw-cut receivers, parts kits with or without saw-cut receivers, or receivers without parts kits. At one time, ATF allowed the importation of parts kits if the receiver had been one-time cut with a saw, just cut in half. Let's say it's some Russian PPSH 41 or, PPS 43, something like that. Those parts kits, including those cut receivers, got distributed. There's no records of them because they didn't count as firearms. So there's no 4473, no way to track them down. They're any place. They're every place. Well, because of that, there's no way when ATF changed their mind about those things, saying, you know what, now we consider, at some point in the past, ATF said, now we consider a receiver to not be destroyed unless it's been cut 3 times diagonally with a torch, where each cut melts away a 1/4 inch of metal. So when ATF changed their mind on that, they didn't get the word out to everybody who has the saw cut kits. Anyway, word to the wise, if you have a saw cut, quote, receiver for a machine gun, you have possession of an unregistered machine gun, my friend, according to ATF. Not telling you that I agree with it, not telling you it's right or wrong, just telling you what ATF believes and what they're going to do if they find you with it. Saw cut receivers are not exempted. They were at one time, but you can thank ATF for changing their mind on that. It's not considered destroyed unless it's been cut 3 times diagonally with a torch in the places where they indicate. So I've had cases like that. You know, a guy thinks he's just selling parts, thinks he's just selling scrap, and an area is busted because it comes across ATF's radar and they take action on it. So please be aware of that. This thing that I see also, you know, the popular line, "I will not comply." You know, that's great. But here's the thing, guys. When they come up with a gun law, let's say they're talking about coming up with making most of these braced pistols, SBRs. You know, "I will not comply," right? This is somebody out there with one saying that. Well, that's fine. Nothing's going to happen until somebody finds you with it. But once they find you with it, you're now under indictment in federal court for a 10-year count of possession, a 10-year count of making, and a 10-year count of not having registered. You know, it's going to cost you $50,000 to $100,000 to a lawyer, even if you win. You're going to be bankrupt. You're probably going to end up losing your job in the meantime if you can't post bond because you can't get out of jail to go to work. It's a big deal. So if you don't like these laws, get active. Don't go out and just buy your next gun. Vote, write letters, call your congressman, do something about it, because the other side definitely is. I've testified in 3 murder trials so far this year as an expert witness. One of them was a double murder trial. And I can tell you that most of the time, these shootings, you know, of course, it's only a murder when somebody dies. If they live, then it's not going to be a murder trial. But the point is, almost every time, it's a case of one guy who wasn't using his brain. I'll put it nicely, versus another guy who wasn't using his brain. I mean, a couple of not, you know, Rhodes Scholars in a place where they shouldn't have been, doing something they had no business doing. And that's where everything goes, you know. So I have not seen any of these where, you know, a guy who's minding his own business, carrying a legal gun, doing what he's supposed to be doing in a place that he very likely ought to be, you know, when somebody attacks him. That's not the kind of case that I run into. It's going out and doing stupidity at crazy hours of the night in places you shouldn't be. You know, a lot of times common sense keeps you out of these problems to begin with. But anyway.
It's actually very comforting to hear, to be honest with you. It's the problem is common sense should be labeled something else. It's not terribly common anymore. But what is next on your list? We're running a little tight on time. Let's see if we can get to them.
Yeah, any other weapons real quick. There are 3 definitions of an any other weapon. The first one says any weapon which will fire a shot which is concealable on the person, but is not a pistol or revolver. And then pistols and revolvers are defined, okay? So something that isn't a pistol because, for instance, it doesn't have a grip at an angle to the bore, it doesn't have a chamber integral to the bore, designed to be fired and held in one hand. So ATF over the decades, and I saw this the whole time I worked for them, they used to beat this into our heads that, hey, a disguised firearm isn't any other weapon. No, it's not. ATF, read the definition. The word disguise does not appear in there any place. So for instance, things like wallet guns, your typical high standard 22 Magnum over and under Derringer, that those Galco wallet holsters, you know, unfold it, put in the Derringer, Velcro it closed, carry it in your pocket like a wallet, has a finger hole for the trigger. Yeah, it's disguised when you look at it at a glance, but that's not in the definition. And as a matter of fact, that thing is still a pistol. It was a pistol before you put it in the wallet. It's a pistol after you put it in the wallet. They make one for the little North American Arms mini revolvers also. Revolvers are exempt from the definition of any other weapon. It's meant to cover things which, although they are disguised, They are not pistols or revolvers as defined. Things that, for instance, if you turn a cigarette lighter into a gun, it'll shoot. Or a sheath knife. There's that grad knife out there.
Or a cane gun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then again, a cane gun, if it's 26 inches long, doesn't count as an AOW.
It's a rifle.
It counts. Well, no, because it's not designed to be fired from the shoulder.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
A handgun, because it's designed to be held and fired in one hand, has a grip at an angle, chamber is integral. It's not a concealable handgun anymore, so it can't fall into the definition of any other weapon if it's not concealable.
Now, I should probably clarify as you're watching this. We're talking about federal law.
Correct.
Each state has its own laws, so your mileage may vary depending on which state you're in as far as your state laws are concerned. Dan's an retired ATF and an expert on federal firearms laws. That's what we're talking about. So don't think that your state may allow you to use things that maybe not. Like
Yes.
I said, you got to check that out on your own.
Because if you're in the state of New Jersey, a slingshot is a firearm according to them. A BB gun, an airsoft toy, muzzle loaders are still firearms. Whole different game. The last thing I had on any other weapons, Joel, is smoothbore handguns. ATF, another thing they beat into our heads. Any handgun, if it has a smooth bore, that's than any other weapon. No, it's not. Read the definition. It says any handgun with a smooth bore, comma, designed to fire a fixed shotgun shell. So you make a 38 special smooth bore, that's no AOW. 22 long rifle, that's not an AOW. It has to also be a gun that'll fire 410 through 10 gauge, fixed shotgun shells. ATF went on record as to what a fixed shotgun shell is when Franklin Armory came out with their Reformation, that AR-15 with the straight grooves in the barrel. Anyway, that's another story also.
You brought up something I do want to ask you about because I know I can see the comments already. You brought up AR pistols. And I'm just going to ask a simple question. Is it still legal to have an AR pistol in the United States? Not in your individual state. Like I said, your mileage may vary depending on what state you're in. Under federal law, is an AR pistol still legal?
Yes. Straight answer, yes. Yeah, the new proposed rule that ATF wrote up concerning braces being stocks, that is still waiting to become ratified. The date hasn't been reached yet like it did for the receivers, the lowers recently. But it will. I don't know what the date is. I'm waiting until the dust settles. But once it does, then ATF has that form that you're going to have to apply to your braced pistol. And does it have 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, or 4 points? If it's a 1 point gun, it's not an SBR. If it has 2, it might be. Number 3, it most likely is. And number 4, yes, it is. And it's subject to registration. Now, the reason I am waiting until the dust settles, as I put it, for that thing to ratify is look at this last rule concerning receivers. It did become finalized August 24th. 2 whole days, count them, 2 days later, a federal judge in Texas filed an injunction against ATF saying this is outside the scope of your jurisdiction. It should have been done by Congress. It's not yours to come up with. And don't quote me on this, but I believe as a result of that, there are probably no federal prosecutors any place in the country prosecuting that new rule because of the likelihood that it's going to fail, and they don't want to spin their wheels. They don't want to lose. So it has no teeth. And that's liable to happen with this next one, too, to your point, because several congressmen have written letters to ATF saying, hey, this is garbage.
Dan, is there anything else we should be talking about?
That's probably enough for today. We'll save some stuff for next time, Joel. Hopefully you'll have me back.
Absolutely. Anytime, brother. I'm just grateful to see you. I haven't seen you in quite a while. Thank you so very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for watching the entire video. I'm very grateful that you did. That's right. This is GunGuyTV. We are defending the Second Amendment one episode at a time. So I hope you learned some things from Dan O'Kelly. I do want to remind you again, I've said it a couple of times during the interview. We were talking about federal law, again, state by state. Every state has its own laws. There's 50 different sets of them. So depending on the state you're in, your mileage may vary. Make sure that you know what your state laws are as well. Have a great week. Once again, if you get an opportunity, please do join GunGuyTV crew. It helps me keep the lights on, and you'll have access to a lot of stuff that you can't get here. And wherever you go, whatever you do, please stay safe.